The moment the security guard whispered those words, my heart froze mid-beat. I saw him pour something into your juice. My hand, already reaching for the glass, trembled. The condensation slid down my fingers, but all I could feel was the burn of disbelief. My son? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The clinking chatter of dishes around me faded into an eerie silence. The restaurant's warm lighting suddenly felt too bright, too harsh, as if it was exposing something I wasn't ready to see. My name is Karen Mills, 46 years old, owner of a small bakery on the edge of town. My life used to revolve around one person, my only son, Ethan. He's 23, brilliant, and complicated. When my husband passed away 5 years ago, Ethan was my entire world. I thought our bond, built through shared grief and late-night talks over tea, was unbreakable. Until recently. In the past year, Ethan had changed. He'd grown secretive, distant, and oddly controlling. He'd started talking about helping me manage my finances, making sure I wasn't being taken advantage of, keeping things in order. At first, I thought it was sweet, my son wanting to protect me. But little by little, that protectiveness began to feel more like possession. He had access to my bank accounts for convenience. He insisted on driving me everywhere, for safety. He even told my bakery staff to call him first if there were any issues. I brushed it off as love mixed with worry, but deep down, a quiet unease began to grow like a splinter under the skin you can't quite see, but always feel. That afternoon, we were at Chateau Lily, the same restaurant where we used to celebrate his birthdays when he was a kid. He'd asked me to lunch to talk about something important. He looked charming, crisp shirt, clean haircut, that same easy smile that once melted my heart. Mom, he'd said, reaching for my hand, I've been thinking, maybe it's time for you to slow down. Sell the bakery. You've worked enough. Let me handle things for a while. I laughed lightly, half flattered, half confused. Sell it? Ethan, the bakery is my life. It's not just work. It's my home. His smile faltered just for a split second before he masked it with a casual sip of water. Of course, I get that. But, maybe it's time to think long-term, right? You could travel, relax. Let me take care of things. Something about the way he said take care of things sent a chill through me. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it quickly and stood. Mom, I just need to make a quick call outside, okay? Don't go anywhere. He left. That's when the security guard approached me, a tall, broad man with weary eyes that seemed to have seen too much. He hesitated, glanced around, then leaned in close enough that I caught the faint smell of coffee on his breath. Ma'am, he said quietly, don't drink that. I frowned, startled. What do you mean? He looked toward the door Ethan had just exited, then back at me. That young man you came with, I saw him pour something into your juice. From a small silver vial. He thought no one noticed, but the cameras caught it. You might want to call someone. My stomach twisted. You must be mistaken, I whispered. My voice came out thinner than I expected. That's my son. His expression didn't change. I'm sorry, ma'am. But I'm sure of what I saw. My hands shook so violently I had to steady them against the table. My mind scrambled for logic. Maybe it's vitamins, maybe it's nothing. Ethan had always been caring. He brought me supplements, health drinks, new recipes to boost my energy. But then images flashed through my head. The times I'd felt dizzy after meals he prepared. The nights I'd slept longer than usual after taking the tea he made. The way he'd always insisted, don't worry, Mom. I'll handle everything. I looked at the orange liquid in front of me. The ice cubes had started to melt, the straw leaning lazily against the glass. My reflection stared back, pale, uncertain, trembling. Slowly, I pushed the drink away. When Ethan returned a minute later, cheerful as ever, I forced a smile. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, he said, sliding into his seat. Just business stuff. You didn't touch your drink. I shrugged. Waiting for you. He grinned. That's sweet. Then, eyes gleaming, he added, you really should trust me more, Mom. The guard's warning echoed in my head like a drumbeat. I smiled, steady but cold. I do, Ethan. Completely. But inside, something had shifted. The mother who'd once trusted blindly was gone. Now, I was watching. listening, waiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words of the security guard played over and over in my head like a broken record. I saw him pour something into your juice. I sat in the dark kitchen, the clock ticking loudly on the wall, my untouched glass of juice sitting in the sink where I'd poured it out the moment we got home. I kept staring at it, as if the orange liquid might whisper its secrets. How could I even think something like that about my own son? Ethan was my heart, my reason for getting out of bed after his father died. He was the boy who used to leave me sticky notes saying you're the best mom in the world. The boy who held my hand through every storm. And yet, lately, the storms had all begun with him. The next morning, Ethan came into the kitchen, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Morning, Mom. You okay? You look tired." I forced a small laugh. "Just didn't sleep much." He poured himself coffee, humming a tune. "You should really start taking those new vitamins I got you. They'll help you sleep better." My stomach clenched. The vitamins. The same ones he'd started giving me last month, sealed in little clear plastic bags with no label. "Right," I murmured, trying to sound casual. "Those came from your friend, right? The one who studied medicine." "Yeah, Dr. Mason," he said quickly, without looking at me. "He's been helping me get the right doses for you." I'd never met a Dr. Mason. In fact, I wasn't even sure Ethan had any friends from med school he'd dropped out 2 years ago. A flicker of doubt flared in my chest. Small, but sharp. The first red flag had appeared weeks before the restaurant. Back then, I'd noticed small withdrawals from my bank account. Nothing huge, $100 here, $200 there, but when I asked Ethan about it, he brushed it off. "Oh, I used your card to pay the utility bill," he'd said. "Didn't have mine on me. Don't worry, I'll transfer it back." He never did. Later, when I checked my banking app, I saw transfers to a name I didn't recognize, A. Rayner. When I asked, Ethan snapped. "Mom, do you not trust me? You're acting paranoid." I'd backed off immediately, feeling guilty. "Of course I trust you, sweetheart. I was just curious." Now, remembering that moment, I realized how often he used guilt to silence me. The second red flag was the phone calls. Every night after dinner, Ethan would step outside to take a work call. He wasn't working, at least, not officially. He'd told me he was building an investment project and needed privacy while he sorted out deals. One night, I accidentally overheard him through the open window. His tone was sharp, desperate. "No, she doesn't suspect anything yet." "Yes, I'll get it done soon. Just trust me, all right?" My chest tightened. "She doesn't suspect anything yet." When he came back in, I asked, "Who were you talking to?" He froze for half a second before forcing a smile. "Just a friend." You know how people get dramatic when money's involved. I wanted to believe him. I tried to believe him. But from that night on, I started locking my bedroom door. The third red flag came in the form of favoritism and manipulation. At the bakery, my longtime assistant, Lena, pulled me aside one morning. "Karen, I don't know if this is my place, but Ethan's been coming here a lot when you're not around. He says he's handling payroll, but he told the staff not to tell you." My hands went cold. "He what?" Lena hesitated. "He said you were stressed and that he was helping. But, yesterday, he took cash from the register and said it was for business expenses." It just didn't sit right with me. My throat tightened. Ethan was like family to Lena. She'd known him since he was little. The fact that even she doubted him made my stomach twist. Still, I defended him. "I'm sure there's a reason. Maybe he's just trying to help." But even as I said it, my voice trembled. The emotional weight of it all began to crush me. I started second-guessing everything, every word, every glance, every time Ethan smiled. I felt trapped between love and suspicion, a war raging in my chest. One moment I'd scold myself for being paranoid, the next I'd remember the guard's voice warning me not to drink my own juice. Sometimes, I'd catch Ethan watching me. Not with affection but calculation. Like he was studying me. Measuring something invisible. I began keeping notes. Dates. Conversations. Bank statements. I told myself it was just to clear my head, to keep track. But deep down, I knew I was building evidence against my own son. One evening, I pretended to fall asleep on the couch. Ethan thought I was out cold. I watched through half-lidded eyes as he quietly walked to my purse, took out my phone, and scrolled through it. Then he smiled just a faint, chilling smirk and walked back to his room. That smile haunted me the rest of the night. The next morning, as he kissed my forehead and said, "Love you, Mom," I looked into his eyes, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I believed him. It happened 3 days after the restaurant incident, 3 days of walking on eggshells, pretending everything was normal while my inside screamed that nothing was. Ethan had become extra attentive, almost suffocatingly so. He made my coffee before I woke up, offered to drive me to the bakery, and hovered whenever I tried to work. To anyone else, it would have looked like love. But to me, it felt like surveillance. Then, that Friday morning, a letter arrived that shattered everything. The envelope was from Harrison and Bloom Legal Associates, the same law firm that handled my late husband's estate. I hadn't heard from them in years. I opened it absent-mindedly while Ethan was in the shower. Inside was a document titled Transfer of Power of Attorney and Estate Assets. My eyes scanned the words in disbelief. This letter is to confirm that the power of attorney for Mrs. Karen Mills has been reassigned to her son, Mr. Ethan Mills, effective immediately. I blinked. Reassigned? I'd never signed any such thing. The paper bore my name, my signature, but I had never seen this document before. The blood drained from my face. My hands shook as I flipped through the rest of the packet. Ethan was now listed as the primary owner of my bakery, my savings accounts, and even my house. He hadn't just been helping me manage things. He'd already taken them. "Mom? Everything okay?" His voice made me jump. Ethan was standing in the doorway, towel around his shoulders, smiling casually as if my world hadn't just collapsed in my hands. "Where did this come from?" I demanded, holding up the letter. His expression flickered just for a heartbeat, then softened into practiced calm. "Oh, that? Yeah, I meant to tell you about it. Remember when we met with the notary last month?" I frowned. "The notary? That was for the bakery insurance renewal." He smiled, stepping closer. "Right. And while we were there, I had them add a few forms, just legal housekeeping. You know, in case something happens to you. It's better if I can take care of things. Without telling me." His smile thinned. "You're overreacting, Mom. I'm protecting you. You forget things sometimes, and I don't forget signing away my entire life." Something in me snapped. The grief, the guilt, the denial, all of it boiled over. "What are you doing, Ethan? What are you trying to take from me?" His eyes turned cold. Not angry, not guilty, just cold. "I'm not taking anything. I'm just making sure you don't ruin everything Dad built." My heart clenched. "Your father would never." He cut me off sharply. "Dad trusted you too much. He left everything to you, and look what you've done, stuck in that bakery, wasting your health on cupcakes and pity." The words hit like knives. "So that's what this is about," I whispered. "You think you deserve it more than me?" He scoffed. "Deserve? I'm the one who's actually thinking about the future. You wouldn't even have to work another day if you'd just let go." I stared at him, realizing the truth. The kindness, the vitamins, the insistence that I rest, it wasn't care. It was a strategy. He wanted control. And the juice was never meant to help me recover. After he left for the afternoon, I locked myself in my bedroom and collapsed onto the floor, shaking. Tears burned down my face as I clutched the letter. How could a child I'd raised alone, the boy I'd read bedtime stories to and sacrificed everything for, be capable of this? Every red flag I'd ignored now blazed in my memory. The secret bank transfers. The mysterious phone calls. The vitamins. The juice. He hadn't been taking care of me. He'd been conditioning me, slowly eroding my strength, making me doubt myself, so I'd be too weak to fight when he finally took everything. The betrayal wasn't just legal. It was personal. Intimate. Poison in the guise of love. That night, I went through his room while he was out. I hated myself for it, but I needed proof. In his desk drawer, I found a folder labeled Transition Plan. Inside were spreadsheets, emails, and notes, plans to sell my bakery to a private investor named A. Rayner, the same name I'd seen in my bank transfers. One email read: "Once my mother's assets are transferred, I'll proceed with the sale." The doctor says the doses should keep her compliant until the paperwork finalizes. My knees gave out. The room spun. The doses. That's what he'd been putting in my food. In my tea. In my juice. Something to keep me compliant. Something to make me agreeable. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was an attempted slow poisoning. When Ethan came home later that night, I pretended to be asleep on the couch again. He stood there for a while, just watching me. Then, as he turned away, I caught a glimpse of the small silver vial in his hand, the one the security guard had described. He slipped it back into his pocket and went upstairs. I lay there in the dark, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My son had tried to drug me. He'd forged my signature. He'd stolen my life while smiling in my face. But one thing he didn't know. I wasn't the weak woman he thought I was. As I stared into the shadows of my quiet house, I whispered to myself. You taught me to fight, Ethan. Now you'll see what that really means. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, the same boy who used to run through sprinklers in our backyard, laugh until he hiccuped, and beg for one more bedtime story. And then, over that innocent image, came the echo of the guard's voice, I saw him pour something into your juice. It was no longer just suspicion. It was the truth. And it was tearing me apart. But grief eventually burns itself out. And when it does, it leaves behind something far more dangerous: clarity. By dawn, I wasn't crying anymore. I was thinking. Ethan had stolen my signature, my business, my bank accounts, and had tried to turn me into some sedated, obedient version of myself. He wanted my silence, my surrender. That was the moment I decided he would get neither. I looked around my small kitchen, once warm and filled with the scent of cinnamon and love. Now it felt like a crime scene. My eyes landed on an old photograph pinned to the fridge. Ethan at age 10, covered in flour, proudly holding a tray of burnt cookies. Beneath it, in messy handwriting, he'd written, "We don't quit, Mom." The irony hit like a blade, but it also ignited something deep inside me. No, I wouldn't quit. Not for him. Not even because of him. That morning, I went into the bakery early before dawn, before the staff arrived. Lena, my assistant, came in an hour later and stopped when she saw me at the counter, sorting through receipts and ledgers. "Karen, you okay? You look different." "I am different," I said quietly, not looking up. "I need your help." Her concern deepened. "With what?" I slid the forged legal document across the counter. "With proving my son did this." For a long moment, she just stared. Then she nodded. "Whatever you need." That simple sentence, her loyalty, her faith, cracked something open inside me. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Over the next few days, I started moving carefully, methodically. Ethan thought I was still oblivious, a confused, aging mother who needed his guidance. I played that part perfectly. I let him make my tea again, but this time, I swapped the cups when he wasn't looking and secretly saved the liquid in a sealed glass jar. I started recording our conversations on my phone. Every patronizing comment, every time he mentioned managing things, every veiled threat disguised as care, I documented it all. At night, I'd sit in my room listening to those recordings, forcing myself to hear the manipulation in his voice. It was painful, like reliving every betrayal twice, but it was also empowering. Each recording made me stronger, sharper, colder. Because now I had proof. And soon, I'd have justice. The real trigger moment came unexpectedly. 3 days later, I stopped by the lawyer's office pretending to be confused about the letter. I told the receptionist I'd like to clarify the documents Ethan had filed. The lawyer, a polite man in his 60s, looked uneasy when I mentioned Ethan's name. "Mrs. Mills, your son said you were unwell. That you'd asked him to take over your estate because of memory lapses." My breath hitched. "He said what?" He sighed, sliding a paper toward me. "I'm sorry, but he presented medical paperwork confirming early-stage cognitive decline. We had no reason to doubt it." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. Then I saw the doctor's signature at the bottom, Dr. A. Mason. The fake doctor. The one he'd mentioned when he gave me those so-called vitamins. Everything clicked. The vials. The supplements. The dizziness. He hadn't been trying to make me forget, he'd been trying to make me look insane. That was it. That was the moment the hurt transformed into resolve. I walked out of that law office with shaking hands but steel in my spine. The weak, guilt-ridden mother Ethan had preyed on was gone. By the time I reached my car, I already had a plan forming. Step 1, get the juice and vitamins tested. Step 2, expose the forged documents. Step 3, take back everything he stole and make sure he never hurt anyone again. But even as anger pulsed through me, another emotion lingered underneath heartbreak. Because no matter what he'd done, a part of me still saw the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. And yet, I knew I had to kill that part, the one that kept forgiving, explaining, rationalizing. That softness had become my weakness. And weakness was what Ethan counted on. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, studying the woman staring back at me. My eyes were red but sharp. My hair was streaked with grey but steady. For the first time in years, I saw strength where there used to be fear. I whispered to my reflection, he used my love against me. Now I'll use his confidence against him. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Lena. Tomorrow, we start digging. Quietly. Then, I placed the jar of juice, the vitamins, and the forged papers into a box, sealed it, and wrote one word across the top, evidence. When Ethan knocked on my door that night, smiling, asking if I wanted tea, I smiled back sweetly. Sure, I said. Just how you make it. He didn't notice the subtle shift in my tone, calm, calculated, no longer fearful. Because while he thought he was keeping me under control, I was already 3 steps ahead. For the first time since that fateful lunch, I wasn't afraid of my son. I was preparing for him. And deep down, I knew the next time he tried to poison me, he'd be the one swallowing the trap. I told myself the plan had to be surgical. No melodrama. No desperate charges and sobbing accusations that a practiced liar could parry. If Ethan believed he still had the upper hand, he would make mistakes. He already had. Now I would bait them. Step 1, secure the evidence. I started with what was closest: the juice jar I'd swapped at the restaurant, the tiny vial I'd seen in his hand, and the packets of vitamins he'd been slipping into my tea. Lena drove me to a small independent lab across town. No fanfare, no lawyers yet. We handed the samples over under the pretense of food safety concerns. The technician promised results in 3 days. Waiting felt like listening to a clock while a storm gathered. Step 2, document the pattern. I compiled everything into a single folder: bank statements showing transfers to A. Rayner, the forged power of attorney, the transition plan spreadsheet from Ethan's drawer, the recordings of his late-night calls, and the surprised, clipped way he'd explained the notary. I timestamped them, transcribed clips into text, and printed every email I could find on Lena's old desktop where Ethan had left himself logged in. The paperwork read like a map of his scheme. Step 3, expose the fraud slowly. Straight confrontation would have been my instinct years ago. Now I acted more like a chess player. I arranged a casual meeting with Harrison and Bloom, this time with Lena at my side as a witness. I asked questions that forced the lawyer's hand. How was the medical assessment obtained? Can you show me the original notarized forms? The lawyer, uncomfortable, gave me copies that I knew could be audited. He also admitted, unprompted, that they'd received a phone call from someone named A. Rayner asking about a sale. That name was a thread I would pull. Step 4, test the poison theory. The lab called back before I expected it. The verdict: traces of a slow-acting sedative in both the juice sample and the vitamin sachets. I felt physical relief and cold rage in equal measures. We had what we needed to prove intent. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. If I alerted the authorities, Ethan might destroy the rest, delete emails, bribe people, or accelerate the sale. I needed him to move forward on his timetable. Step 5, set the bait. I began to play the role Ethan expected, the compliant mother, the one who'd been wearing her hurt like a soft shawl. I let him continue his ministrations, smiling when he hovered, thanking him for his help. But I also fed him just enough information to nudge him into making the next move. Over breakfast, I casually asked, "Have you heard anything from Mr. Rayner? I wonder when the buyer will finalize." He brightened, the predator in him showing. "Soon," he said. "I'm meeting him this Friday. Once the check's clear, the sale goes through." Perfect. Step 6, amplify his confidence. I tipped my hand strategically. I spoke to a broker friend at the bakery, letting slip that I'd be out of commission for a while, enough for the buyer to consider a quick sale. I let the bakery ledger show a few minor accounting errors, fabricated by me, so Ethan would feel justified in pushing the sale through fast. He began scheduling meetings, making calls to accelerate proceedings. The more hurried he became, the more careless. Step 7. Expose the accomplice. A. Rayner had been a name on paper until I placed a quiet call to a clerk at the county records office and traced the shell company. It led to a small consultancy firm 2 towns over and, ultimately, a junior broker with a guilty conscience. She met me in the bakery's storeroom, eyes darting like a trapped bird. I promised her protection if she told the truth. She did. Rayner had been paid a retainer by Ethan, but the checks had bounced. He'd promised to cover the difference when the transfer took place. She handed me a scanned copy of an email thread Ethan arranging payments, praising the doctor and mentioning aftercare. Step 8. Weaponize complacency. I set the trap's final piece that night. I prepared a pot of tea and left it on the counter, the same way Ethan always did. Then I wired an old smartphone to record audio and video, and hid it in the teapot's cozy. I planted a second camera in the pantry where he often lingered. I made the scene believable. I acted woozy in the afternoon, letting a neighbor witness me slump on the bench enough to make Ethan comfortable that his plan was working. All the while, he strutted through the house with the smugness of a man already counting his spoils. He arranged the buyer's visit for Friday mid-morning and bragged on the phone about how easy the transfer would be once I was declared incompetent. He still believed he controlled the timeline. He still believed I was his subdued old mother. He didn't notice the way Lena watched him alert, not loyal, and the way I kept my face an unreadable mask. The tension tightened around the house like a wire. I could feel the climax approaching, not like an explosion, but like a trapdoor opening beneath him. I had the lab results, the broker's testimony, the recordings, and the forged documents. All I needed was the confession or the physical act that would tie his words to his crimes. When Ethan called that night to say he'd be home late because he had to handle Rayner's last questions, I let him go. Let him meet his accomplice. Let him believe the sale would finish by next week. He walked into the web he'd woven himself. I sat at the kitchen table under the yellow light, folder of evidence beside me, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. He still felt in control. That made his fall inevitable. The bakery smelled like cinnamon rolls and tension. Morning sunlight cut through the front windows in golden slashes, lighting dust motes that looked for all the world like witnesses. I placed the folder of evidence on the counter: bank statements, the lab report, the broker's printout, notarized copies, and slid into my chair as if I'd merely come in to check inventory. Lena stood at my shoulder, calm and unreadable. Outside, customers chatted, oblivious to the storm about to break. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, hair perfect, suit pressed, grin already rehearsed. Behind him walked the buyer's intermediary, A. Rayner's junior broker, pale and twitchy, and a tall man in plain clothes who introduced himself as Detective Morales. I hadn't called the police directly. Detective Morales was the quiet kind who followed leads and compiled evidence until it was bulletproof. He'd come at my request, under the pretense of protecting my property during the transfer. The bait had worked. Ethan's eyes brightened when he saw the broker. "Everything's set, Mom. Today's the day. We sign, and it's done." He winked at me as if I were a prop. His smile never reached his eyes. I kept my face soft. "That's wonderful." I spoke like a woman relieved to be relieved of burdens. Inside, a cold machine of focus hummed. The broker started the paperwork, contracts spread over the counter, pens ready. Ethan guided her through the signatures with the practiced patience of a man who expected only obedience. He poured himself a glass of juice from the same brand he'd always chosen for me, then set the decanter beside my own glass. My heart beat steady as a drum. The cameras were rolling, the teapot phone, the pantry camera, and the bakery's own CCTV that I'd asked the manager to save for us. "Before we sign," I said softly, "I think we should verify who authorized these transfers." I pushed the forged power of attorney across to the broker, letting it flutter like a challenge. "This was never signed by me." Ethan laughed, a brittle sound. "Mother." He reached for the document before Detective Morales's hand closed over it. The detective's expression was polite until he spoke. "We have your mother's signed statement saying she never authorized a transfer and lab results confirming sedative in the juice you handed her on October 3 RD. He looked at Ethan, and then at the broker. "We also have video." The video hit like a spotlight. Detective Morales tapped his phone and the pantry camera feed filled the bakery's small television behind the counter. For a second, it was only a blur. Then there he was, Ethan, hunched, hand twitching as he opened a tiny vial and tilted it, the liquid disappearing into the decanter. He glanced toward the doorway, then back, careful and quick. The sound in the bakery evaporated into a long, stunned silence. Ethan's face shifted, first flush, then a flush of anger, and he made to lunge for the screen. "That's edited. That's," he stammered. His voice, so used to commanding silence, cracked. "Not edited," Lena said slowly, and then slid the lab report across the counter, traces of a slow-acting sedative detected in juice sample and sachets labeled as vitamins. She looked at me, and for the first time he saw our alliance, two people he thought he controlled. The broker's hands trembled. I can't be involved with fraud," she whispered. The junior broker shoved a stack of unsigned checks toward me, they were for transfers that had never cleared. "He promised me," she muttered, then folded under the weight of the evidence. Ethan's composure collapsed. He reached into his pocket, fingers frantic. He wanted to deny, to charm, to take the stage by force, but the camera had captured his hand, the vial, the pour. Detective Morales stepped forward and placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Mr. Mills, you are under arrest for attempted poisoning, elder financial exploitation, and fraud," Morales intoned, his voice filling the bakery like thunder. The customers began to murmur, phones drawn, recording. The boy who'd once been my child stared at me with the dumb, bright terror of a trapped animal. He tried to bargain it was for her own good. And when the words hit the air, they sounded small, cowardly, and unimaginably cruel. The junior broker, shaking, produced emails. He promised the doctor would keep her calm until the sale. She handed over the thread with Dr. A. Mason's forged signature. Across the top was Ethan's own planning spreadsheet, the one about aftercare. Then the security guard from the restaurant walked in like an avenging shadow, tall, quiet, eyes steady. He didn't need to say much. He looked directly at the footage, then at Ethan. "I told you I saw him pour something." His voice was low, but for the first time it filled a courtroom. "No, this room of witnesses." He signed an affidavit on the spot. That single testimony tilted more than I expected. Patrons who remembered the lunch now whispered, confirming seeing him leave the table with a small vial. Ethan turned on me with a look that would have once melted me. "Why are you doing this?" he rasped. "Why would you betray your son?" His face was wet, but his eyes searched not for remorse but for an excuse. I stood and walked to him slowly, the whole bakery watching. I could feel every stare, every phone lens. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I said, quietly, the words that had been sharpening in me for months. "You taught me to fight, Ethan. You taught me to never quit. Today I'm finishing what I started." Detective Morales snapped cuffs around his wrists. He tried to pull away, then lunged toward the decanter on the counter. Too late. He reached for it, tipping his head to drink in panic, and for a heartbeat the room held breath. He staggered, not from the juice he'd forced his panic into a clumsy mockery of guilt, but it was enough. The buyer receded. The broker recoiled. The customers whispered the kind of disgust that has no mercy. As they led him out, people filmed and posted. The bakery's front window became a screen showing his fall in real-time, headlines already forming in the minds of strangers. I watched him go, his swagger gone, his plans unraveling into the public record, forged documents, fraudulent emails, bank transfers. The bank accounts were frozen that afternoon, court injunctions filed before sunset. When the door swung shut behind the officers, the bakery exhaled. Lena reached for my hand, and for the first time since the guard's whisper, I allowed myself to breathe. The room buzzed with a new sound, not the whispered pity of customers, but the murmur of justice being done. Outside, a reporter's camera caught my profile as I stood in the sun, older, lined, but unbowed. I met the lens without flinching. Ethan had wanted my silence. He had wanted my surrender. Instead, he left me with evidence, witnesses, and enough proof to make sure his betrayal would follow him into every future. As the officers led him down the front steps, his face turned one last time toward me, open, stunned, defeated. I didn't smile. I only watched him go, and thought of the small, bitter vial he'd thought would secure his future. The world outside the bakery seemed louder now, as if it had been waiting to notice. The climax had come, and in the bright, undeniable light, his ruin was already beginning to bloom. The courtroom was colder than the bakery had ever been. Weeks had passed since the day Ethan was led away in handcuffs, but the echoes of that moment still hung in my mind, the clink of metal, the camera flashes, the hum of whispered disbelief. Now, it was Judgment Day. I sat in the front row, hands folded, the same hands that once packed his school lunches and tied his shoelaces. Across from me, my son, my only child, sat at the defendant's table in a grey suit that no longer fit him. The arrogance was gone. He looked smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves had stripped away his lies. The prosecutor's voice was calm but sharp as glass. Your Honor, we have video evidence of Mr. Mills attempting to drug his mother's drink with a sedative. We have forged documents transferring her assets, and multiple emails detailing plans to declare her mentally unfit. This was not care, it was control. Not love, it was greed. Ethan didn't look up. He just twisted his ringless fingers, jaw tight. When the judge finally spoke, her words landed with a finality that could split stone. For attempted poisoning, financial fraud, and elder abuse, this court sentences Ethan Mills to 10 years in state prison, with no eligibility for early parole. The gavel fell. And with it, the version of my son I'd once known, bright, ambitious, smiling, was gone for good. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I only whispered the words that felt truer than any prayer: you reap what you pour. The weeks after the trial felt surreal. The bakery that once echoed with customers' chatter was busier than ever. Strangers came just to shake my hand, to tell me I was brave, that my story had reminded them to trust their instincts. I'd been featured in a small-town newspaper article titled "Mother Outsmarts Her Own Son's Poison Plot." At first, the attention embarrassed me. I wasn't a hero, I was a mother who had nearly lost everything. But slowly, I realized something deeper: my survival wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A choice to open my eyes instead of shutting them for love's sake. Lena stayed by my side, running the bakery with me. You saved yourself, she'd said one night as we closed up. You taught every woman here what strength really looks like. I smiled. No, I said softly, wiping down the counter. I just stopped mistaking silence for peace. The security guard, the man who'd whispered the truth that started it all, still stopped by sometimes. We'd share coffee before the morning rush, laughing quietly about life's strange turns. I never asked him why he spoke up that day, I just thanked him every time he walked through the door. He'd always smile and say, "Ma'am, sometimes people need someone to notice what's being poured right in front of them." Months turned to a year. Ethan wrote letters from prison, apologies laced with excuses, regret tangled with self-pity. I didn't respond. I kept them all in a box, unread after the first few, labeled lessons. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about freeing him. It was about freeing myself. I rebuilt everything he'd tried to take. The bakery expanded, business flourished, and I donated part of the profits to a fund for victims of family financial abuse. My story, our story, became a quiet anthem for resilience. But there was one final moment of poetic justice I hadn't seen coming. One afternoon, my lawyer called. "Margaret," she said, "we've finalized the restitution. Ethan's portion of your father's inheritance has been legally reassigned to you. Every cent he tried to steal will go into the bakery fund." I couldn't help but laugh, a deep, tired laugh that came from somewhere years old. The money he'd poisoned himself trying to claim would now feed families, fund scholarships, and keep my bakery alive for generations. In the end, he had poured his own downfall. I walked through the bakery that evening, closing up for the night. The smell of warm bread filled the air, comforting, familiar, forgiving. I poured myself a glass of fresh orange juice, the same brand as before, but this time I watched every drop, every glint of light through the liquid. I raised the glass to the window, where the reflection of my older, stronger self looked back. "Here's to truth," I whispered. "And to those who think love makes us blind, it only makes us watch harder." Outside, the street was calm. The neon sign flickered, Mills Bakery in soft gold. It used to feel like his legacy. Now, it was mine. I took a sip, sweet, clean, and clear. The world tasted safe again. To everyone watching this. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to realize they were poisoning your peace behind your back? Have you ever had to rebuild from betrayal so deep it shook your faith in love itself? If you have, tell me your story below. I read every comment. Because somewhere out there, another person might need to know they're not alone. That truth can win, and poison doesn't always come in a bottle. If this story struck something in you, hit subscribe. Let's keep telling the stories that remind people that justice can be poetic. Because in the end, he poured poison into my glass. But I made it into my toast to freedom.